Imagine strolling through a sun-dappled forest trail on a spring morning. The air is fresh, birds are singing, and suddenly you spot it. A brilliant carpet of wildflowers off the path. There's a white trillium gleaming like a star on the forest floor, almost begging to be picked. I get it. The urge to pluck the wild bloom as a souvenir or as a gift is so tempting. But in today's video, Molle Dorst, want to share why resisting the urge is one of the best things that you can do for nature. We're about to explore the secret lives of wildflowers that you should never touch, the legal and ethical reasons they're protected, and how doing the right thing can make you feel even more connected to the wild. By the end, you'll know the fascinating backstory of these blooms, from the laws that guard them to the legends that celebrate them. Let's dive in. Before we spotlight specific flowers, let's chat about why certain wildflowers are off limits. It turns out that there are both legal and ethical reasons to leave those pretty blooms be. In many places, picking endangered or protected plants is actually against the law. For instance, here in Ontario, our Endangered Species Act makes it illegal to harm or to collect any plant that's listed as endangered or threatened. That means if a wildflower is at risk of disappearing, you could face fines or even jail time for digging it up and picking it. Yeah, it is that serious. In fact, some plant poachers in Canada have been fined upwards of $250,000 and given a year in jail for stealing endangered plants like wild American ginseng. And it's not just in Canada. In the US, plucking plants in national or state parks can carry hefty penalties too. For example, in California, even picking a single California golden poppy, the state flower, in a state park is a misdemeanor that can mean a fine of up to $1,000 and 6 months in jail. The rules might vary by region, but the message is the same everywhere. Wildflowers are part of our shared natural heritage, and they're often protected by law for good reason. But beyond the legal stuff, there's an ethical side. Conservation and respect. Many wildflowers take years to grow and bloom, and some of them are incredibly fragile. When we pick them, we're not just removing a beautiful sight, we might be dooming the whole plant or preventing it from reproducing. Think of it this way. Wildflowers aren't just decorations in our outdoor experience, they're life forms with their own role in the ecosystem, feeding pollinators like butterflies and bees, and sometimes existing as only a few remaining individuals in the wild. Removing even one of them can have a big impact on their survival. Plus, as nature lovers, many of us follow the leave no trace principle. Take only pictures, leave only footprints. This mindset ensures that the next person who comes along, or the next generation, gets to experience that same magical bloom in that spot undisturbed. So with both laws and love for nature in mind, let's explore some specific wildflowers that you should never touch. Each of these has a very special story. Some are legally protected, some carry cultural significance, and all of them deserve our care and respect. Meet the White Trillium, the superstar of Ontario's woodlands. The elegant flower with these 3 white petals is Ontario's provincial flower. It's been the official emblem of the province since 1937. If you grew up around here, you might have heard a common folk warning, don't pick the trilliums, it's illegal. Well, it turns out this is actually a myth, and there's no general law banning picking wild trilliums in Ontario. Surprising, right? The confusion here comes from the fact that it's illegal to pick or dig up trilliums in British Columbia, where a special law once protected them. Ontario even considered a Trillium Protection Act in 2009 with fines of $500 for picking one, but that bill never came to law. So technically, plucking a white trillium on your own property or along an unprotected roadside isn't a crime in Ontario. However, and this is a big however, picking a trillium is still a terrible idea. Why? Because white trilliums are extremely delicate plants. These plants have only 3 leaves, and they need those leaves to gather energy after they bloom. If you yank the stem, or especially if you damage the leaves, you can seriously harm or even kill the plant. Trilliums also grow painfully slowly. Believe it or not, a trillium seed can take 7 to 10 years to grow into a flowering plant. So when you see a blooming white trillium, you're looking at nearly a decade of growth and patience. Removing that bloom not only stops the plant from making seeds that year, which means no future baby trilliums, but it might set the plant back for years, if not decades, if not forever. In fact, naturalists say that a beautiful trillium is 8 years in the making, a reminder of how long it takes these gems to appear. And if that's not enough reason, remember that provincial parks and conservation areas do have rules against removing vegetation. In any Ontario park, it's illegal to disturb or to remove any plants, trilliums included. So definitely don't pick them in protected areas. You could get big fines there. There's also a related species of trilliums that is truly endangered and legally protected, the drooping trillium, or the Trillium flexipus. This lesser-known cousin has a white drooping petals and is so rare that it's only found in 2 spots in Canada. It's listed as endangered provincially and federally. That means it's illegal to kill, harm, or collect drooping trillium, or even destroy its habitat in Ontario. So if you ever come across a trillium with a nodding flower, definitely give it space. It's basically a unicorn in the forest. The white trillium itself isn't endangered, it's luckily still common in many parts of Canada, but given its emblematic status and how easily it can be damaged, it has almost a sacred status among nature enthusiasts. The moral of the story here? Admire Ontario's snowy white trilliums with your eyes and your camera, but leave them rooted in the ground. And here's a beautiful cultural note. Many Indigenous communities hold trilliums in high regards. Some First Nations peoples considered the trillium so special that it was too sacred to disturb at all. Various Native American tribes and communities use trillium roots in traditional medicine. For example, Ojibwe healers used it as a remedy in childbirth, calling it birth root. Knowing that, it feels even more respectful to leave this plant untouched, carrying forward a tradition of reverence. When you see a white trillium growing in the forest floor, you're not just looking at a pretty flower. You're witnessing a piece of Ontario's identity and Indigenous heritage, a living thing that connects people to the land across generations. Have you ever seen a rare or beautiful wildflower in the wild? Let me know about it in the comments. I would absolutely love to hear your stories, whether it's a trillium or any blossom that made you stop in your tracks. Sharing your little nature wow moments helps inspire others to keep an eye out and appreciate these wonders, without picking them, of course. And if you want to share your photos, well, why not join us in the ReWild community? You can find the links down in the description. Our next flower is as enchanting as the name sounds, the pink lady's slipper. This wild orchid, with its pink pouch-like petals, looks like something out of a fairy tale. You might also hear it called the moccasin flower, because the blossom shape brings to mind a slipper or a moccasin shape. In fact, there's a beautiful Ojibwe legend about this flower. It tells of a young girl who braved a harsh winter to fetch medicine for her village during an epidemic. In the story, she runs through the snow so hard that she loses her moccasins and injures her feet. But she succeeds in saving her people. When spring arrives, Lady's slipper orchids bloom from where her bloody footprints had been, as a reminder of her courage and her sacrifice. Isn't that amazing? Every time I see pink lady slippers, I think of that legend. It's like the forest is telling a story if you know how to listen. Culturally, this flower is significant beyond those legends as well. The pink lady slipper was chosen as the official flower of Prince Edward Island back in 1947. However, here's a fun fact, it turns out to be pretty rare in PEI. Oops. So they later clarified that any lady slipper could represent the province. In the United States, a close relative, the showy lady slipper, which has pink and white blooms, is the state flower of Minnesota. And Minnesota takes its state flower very serious. Since 1925, it's been illegal to pick or uproot a showy lady slipper there. Minnesota basically said, hands off, nearly a century ago, which is great because these orchids need all the help that they can get. So what makes lady slippers so delicate and why shouldn't we touch them? For starters, they are slow growing and really finicky. It can take many years, sometimes a decade or even more, for a lady slipper orchid to grow from a seed to a mature flowering plant. They also rely on a special relationship with soil fungi to get its nutrients, which means that they don't transplant well at all. If you dig up one or you pick it, chances are it won't survive replanting anywhere. In fact, the Farmer's Almanac notes that the plant essentially can't rejuvenate itself once it's picked. So if you break the stem, that's it. The particular plant likely won't ever bloom again. So lady slippers often grow in specific habitats, like boggy woodlands or pine forests, and those habitats right now are getting more and more rare. Over the years, wild orchid lovers and poachers collecting them for gardens really hurt some of those populations. That's why in many eastern United States where these orchids are listed as endangered, threatened, or of special concern. Even where it's not outright illegal, officials strongly discourage picking or digging them. They'd much prefer you to snap a photo than snap the stem. Here's a little perspective. A wild pink lady slipper you see on a hike might have started growing when you were a little kid, and only just now gathered enough strength to bloom. All that effort for one lovely flower. It feels only right to let it live out its destiny in peace, doesn't it? Plus, seeing lady slipper in the wild is like finding a secret treasure. I remind myself of the first time I encountered it. I practically held my breath and tiptoed away after admiring it as if I had stumbled on a deer or something equally majestic. There was literally part of me that thought if I breathed too hard on it, I might danger it. That feeling of respect and awe is something that we can all share. Oh, and remember how the orchid got its nickname, the moccasin flower? Well, that ties back into Indigenous knowledge as well. The Ojibwe and other native peoples had uses for various lady slipper orchids in traditional medicine. They sometimes used the roots of related species, like the yellow lady slipper, for example, as a remedy for calming nerves or pain. Early settlers even dubbed one orchid American valerian for its sedative properties. So these flowers were just admired. They were part of healing traditions too. And given their importance in stories and healing, it's no wonder there's a reverence for them. There's such deep cultural reverence around them. In short, the pink lady slipper is a flower celebrity that we should only ever touch with our eyes and our cameras. And if you're lucky enough to spot this beautiful pink bloom in the wild, consider it a hello from Mother Nature. One that we answer by just letting it be. Now let's journey out to the prairies for a truly rare wildflower, the Western Prairie Fringed Orchid. If you haven't heard of this one, I'm actually not surprised. It's extremely uncommon and it's found only in very specific places. So picture a tall, elegant orchid with frilly white petals, standing amidst tall grasses, almost like a ghost in the prairie. This species is so special that it's federally protected in both Canada and the US. In the United States, the Western Prairie Fringed Orchid is listed as a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. In Canada, it's even more critical. It's designated endangered and grows only in the southeastern corner of Manitoba. In fact, Manitoba's Tall Grass Prairie Preserve is one of the last refuges for this flower in the wild. Talk about exclusive habitat. Being illegally endangered means it's absolutely forbidden to pick, dig up, or damage this orchid or its habitat. Both Canada's Species at Risk Act and Manitoba's Endangered Species Act protect it. And the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service keeps a very close eye on it south of the border. If someone tried to swipe a Western Prairie Fringed Orchid from the wild, they'd not only risk a huge fine, but also the wrath of the conservation community. There are so few left that every single plant matters. Many known populations of this orchid have fewer than 50 plants surviving, often clinging to that tiny, tiny remnant in the prairies. So losing even one to picking or trampling is a rather big deal. Well, why is this orchid in such trouble? Well, mostly because of its home, the vast tall grass prairie that's largely turned into farmland or swallowed up by development. Less than 1% of Canada's original tallgrass prairie remains, making the orchid a superstar survivor on a shrinking stage. It also faces threats like changes in water drainage, fewer natural fires, which prairie plants need to keep shrubs from crowding them out, and even pesticides that can harm its pollinators. The Western Prairie Fringed Orchid has an interesting pollination story as well. It blooms at night and exudes this beautiful, sweet smell, this sweet scent to attract the sphinx moths, its primary pollinators, under the beautiful moonlight. How romantic is that? But it means that if the moths decline, the orchid has trouble reproducing too. For us nature enthusiasts, the important thing is to know that this orchid is hands-off 100%. Honestly, most people will never encounter it in the wild, and if you do, count yourself incredibly lucky to witness an endangered species in bloom. I have yet to see one in person, it's definitely on my bucket list, but I've seen photos from a guided tour in Manitoba where visitors were carefully led to a site when a few of them were flowering. Everyone stayed on the path, cameras zooming in, not a single toe off the trail. That, my friends, is the kind of respectful distance this flower commands. It's like meeting a celebrity from afar. The Western Prairie Fringed Orchid also reminds us that wildflowers aren't just found in forests. They're in prairies, wetlands, mountains, everywhere. And each ecosystem has its own fragile gems. Just as forest hikers learned not to pick trilliums or lady slippers, prairie hikers learn not to pick orchids or western red lilies. More on that one next. Wherever you go, there might be one plant that's the trillium or the orchid of that region, a beloved or protected species to be mindful of. In short, if you're roaming the prairie and you see this beautiful ghostly white fringed bloom after dusk, enjoy that sight without touching it. This one is under official protection for very good reasons, and leaving it alone is our contribution to keeping a piece of the prairie's story alive. We've highlighted some headliners, but they're not the only wildflowers that come with a do not touch sign. Let's run through a few more notable examples, some from Canada and a couple of them from the United States, so you know it's not just trilliums and orchids that we need to care for. Let's start with the Western Red Lily, also known as the wood lily. This fiery orange lily is the provincial flower of Saskatchewan. It's so cherished that Saskatchewan actually does have a law protecting it under the Emblems Act. Someone picks or digs up a Western red lily, they could face fines of up to $500. More importantly, the plant likely won't survive being moved anyways. Lilies from the wild rarely transplant well. So taking Saskatchewan's floral emblem not only could lighten your wallet, it could almost surely kill the flower. So what's the point? It's best to take a photo of those bright orange blooms in their habitat, waving in the prairie breeze, and let them seed for the next generation. We could also talk about Pacific dogwood and the rhododendron in British Columbia. These two flowering plants, plus the trillium, were once protected by a very special law in both public and private land. That 1996 law was replaced in 2002, but don't get any ideas. It's still prohibited to pick BC's prairie dogwood, their provincial flower, or rhododendrons without permission. They're part of BC's natural heritage. Imagine driving up Vancouver Island and seeing those white dogwood blooms in the spring. Picking them would not only be frowned upon, it might violate local bylaws or park regulations. So hands off the dogwoods. Here's a fun fact. Pacific dogwood is a tree, not a wildflower, but people sometimes try to cut its blooming branches, which is a big no-no. Let's talk about wild leeks, also known as ramps. This one's a little bit different. Wild leeks are more of a wild edible than a pretty flower, but they are a native plant with a cult following among foodies. Quebec discovered that too many people were foraging these tasty wild leeks, so they classified it as a vulnerable species. Now, harvesting wild leeks in Quebec can result in fines of up to $250,000 if you're caught. Oui, you read that right. $250,000. Quebec really wants its wild leeks left in place to recover. So if you love that onion garlic flavor, cultivate some in your garden or join a sustainable harvest event somewhere else. But don't pillage the Quebec woods for them. What about American ginseng? There's been shows about this. It's not a flower per se, but it is an important forest plant with a flower berry cycle. Wild American ginseng's root is highly valued. It's often used in traditional medicine. And poachers nearly wiped it out in parts of Canada and the US. It's endangered in Ontario and Quebec, and getting caught digging it up illegally carries massive penalties. Yeah, up to $250,000, $250,000 in fines, and even jail time. Authorities have put some ginseng patches under video surveillance. So if you ever come across wild ginseng plant on a hike, definitely don't touch it. You're doing a favor to the species struggling to survive, and you'll avoid becoming part of a crime statistic. U.S. National Park wildflowers. When in doubt, assume all wildflowers and plants in general are off limits in national parks. U.S. federal law prohibits removing any plant material from national parks. Rangers often say even picking a single wildflower can earn you a fine. Around $250 has been cited in parks like Rocky Mountains. It seems strict, yes, but imagine millions of visitors visiting the parks, each picking just one flower. There'd be none left really quickly. Some states also have specific laws. For example, the California poppy, the state flower of California, isn't illegal to pick in general, but if it's on public lands like state parks or alongside highways, then it's protected. So the golden rule, enjoy the golden poppies with your eyes, not your hands. And if you're in a state like Minnesota or New Hampshire where the lady slipper is a symbol, we've talked about that earlier, know that the locals will be very unhappy if you disturb them, and you might get in trouble with state laws. Basically, wherever you travel, it's a good rule of thumb to do a quick check if the area has a special plant emblem or protected species. Often parks will have signs saying, "Don't pick the wildflowers," which is in my opinion, pretty clear hint. These examples highlight how much we value our native plants. From big fines to symbolic statuses, society is saying that these wild blooms matter. Each flower has a role. Maybe its pollinators rely on it. Maybe it's cultural significant. Maybe it's just so rare that everyone is that precious. By leaving them alone, we become part of their conservation story. It's like being a guardian just by doing nothing. How cool is that? Another beautiful layer to this topic is the perspectives of Indigenous people towards wildflowers and nature. Long before conservation laws existed, Indigenous communities across North America had traditions and beliefs that fostered respect for the land's plants. Many First Nations have stories, like the Ojibwe legends we mentioned for the trillium and the lady slipper, which carry teachings about these flowers, often lessons of respect, of healing, and of balance. In Indigenous cultures, wildflowers and plants are not seen as mere objects or decoration. They're considered relatives or gifts from the Creator. There's a common principle among many communities that you should never take more than you need. And when you do take something, you offer thanks or tobacco and ensure it's done in a sustainable way. For example, some medicinal plants would only be harvested with prayers and in certain seasons, leaving enough of the plant to continue for its own growth and for others to also use. This mindset inherently protected rare plants from overharvest. We heard how the Ojibwe saw the trillium as a healing plant and even a sacred one only to be handled by medicine people. This indicates it wasn't casually picked by everyone. It had a respected status. Similarly, various tribes and communities use orchids like lady slippers sparingly for remedies, such as easing pain or anxiety. But they also pass down stories that imbue these flowers with lessons, like the story of the moccasin flower, symbolizing bravery and sacrifice. Such stories teach the community, especially the young, to honor the plant, not just treat it as a pretty toy. Another perspective is that wildflowers contribute to what some Indigenous teachings call the medicine of the land. Basically, the idea that just seeing or being around these plants can be healing or spiritually uplifting. You don't have to pick them to benefit from them. Doesn't that resonate with all of us nature lovers? Think about how happy you feel seeing a field of wildflowers swaying in the breeze. That feeling is medicine for the soul. Indigenous elders often encourage people to go out and just be with the plants, to listen and to learn from them. In a way, that's exactly what we're advocating for when we say don't pick, just enjoy. It aligns perfectly with the practices like forest bathing. More on that soon at the end of today's video. I find it inspiring that modern conservation science and ancient Indigenous wisdom independently arrived at the same conclusion. If you love a flower or a plant, the best way to show that your love can be to let it be. By not picking it, you allow it to continue its life, to spread its seeds, and to let others experience its beauty. This creates a cycle of respect and gratitude. It's a mindset we can all learn from and embrace regardless of our background. So next time you feel that urge to pluck a bloom, maybe take a breath and remember that in many cultures, that little flower might be considered a friend or a teacher. How can you treat a wise old friend? Probably not by yanking them out of their home, right? Instead, we sit with them, we appreciate their presence, and maybe we learn a lesson or two. And then we part ways, leaving them in peace. That is a wonderful approach to wildflowers as well. By now, you might be thinking, all right, I won't pick them, but what else can I do? I want to enjoy these flowers more than just a quick glance. Great question. Here are plenty of fulfilling ways to appreciate and even share wildflowers without harming them. Here are a few ideas. Become a wildflower photographer. Taking photos of a flower is a fantastic way to take the flower without removing it. You can capture its beauty and even come back over time to photograph its life cycle from bloom to seed. Some people sketch or paint flowers in the wild, a lovely, slow way to really observe the plant. And by sharing your photos or your art, you can inspire others to love these plants too, all without a single stem being picked. What about nature journaling? You can carry a little notebook, and when you find a special flower, jot down the dates, the location, and what the weather is like. Maybe even a little quick sketch or a note about how it made you feel. You'll build your own personal feel guide of memories. This will deepen your connection more than a plucked flower that withers in hours ever could. I like to learn the story of the flower. Turn that moment of discovery into a small research project. Later on, or on your phone right there, look up the flower's name, its ecology, any cultural facts. Hey, you already heard a few to get you started in this video today. When you know the plant's story, like how it might rely on a certain bee or how it was used by local Indigenous people, you begin to appreciate it on so many more levels. It's like turning a pretty face into a friend with a rich backstory. Try growing native wildflowers at home. If you absolutely love a wildflower and wish that you could have it, consider growing it from seed or from a reputable native plant nursery. Many wildflowers can be propagated and grown in home gardens or in pots legally and sustainably. For example, you can buy trillium seeds or nursery-grown trillium plants for your shade garden, rather than digging them up from the wild. Digging from the wild is often fatal to the plant, remember, and it's illegal on public lands. By growing your own, you also help out pollinators in your area. It's a win-win. You get to enjoy the blooms at home, and the wild populations remain intact. There are also native plant seed swaps and exchanges in many communities, where gardeners trade seeds of local wildflowers. It's a fun way to get new plants and stories from fellow enthusiasts. Here where I live, my local municipality runs a Healthy Yards event where once a year, locals can purchase local flower plants. So I'm going to show you what I purchased and how I'm going to incorporate them into my garden. So definitely subscribe to the channel to check out more about my journey with local flowers and local plants. You can also join conservation efforts. This is what I would consider next level appreciation. You can volunteer for wildflower counts, join guided hikes by nature groups, or help restore habitats. When you actively work to protect these flowers, you'll never look at them the same way again, in the best possible sense. You'll feel proud and connected every time you see one, knowing that you're part of its survival team. What about practicing mindful observation, like forest bathing? A concept originally from Japan, forest bathing, also known as Shinrin-yoku, means immersing yourself in the forest atmosphere and calmly and mindfully. You don't literally bathe, you simply slow down and engage your senses. This is the perfect way to enjoy wildflowers, in my opinion. You sit back, you sit next to that patch of blooms, and you're just present in your senses, noticing the colors, the patterns, the scent, the gentle buzz of the bees that's visiting, the breeze that sways the stems. I feel like I'm there right now. You can take it all in like a spa for your soul. You'll find that leaving the flower doesn't feel like a loss at all. Instead, you gain an experience. And the flower remains to possibly brighten someone else's day, or to become a berry or a seed that the bird might eat, continuing that cycle of life. By doing any of these, you transform from a passive admirer into an active guardian of wildflowers. Each of us can be a protector just by choosing to enjoy nature responsibly. Personally, I found that not picking the flower actually makes me happier in the long run. Why? Because a picked flower is fleeting. It wilts and it's gone. But the memory of finding that lady's slipper, or the photo I took of a trillium, or the note that I scribbled about an orchid at sunset, those memories stay with me. And knowing that flower is still out there, alive and thriving, feels like I left a little positive mark on the world. And I will totally admit to you that there are spots that I go hiking or that I take our forest bathing groups that I know have these fields of wildflowers. And it means so much to me to be able to revisit those spaces throughout the seasons and through the years, to watch those fields grow and evolve and change throughout time. The idea of them not being there really puts a pit in my stomach. So next time you head out on your next nature walk, Maybe even bring a camera with you or a notebook instead of a picking basket. Challenge yourself to see how many colors or species you can find and leave alone. It's oddly satisfying. It's like a scavenger hunt where the treasure is still left in place for the others to discover. As we wrap up our wildflower adventure, let's remember the core message. Look, love, but don't touch these special blooms. We've journeyed through forests, bogs, prairies, meeting trilliums, pink lady slippers, fringed orchids, lilies, and more, each with their own reason to be protected, whether by law, by culture, or by sheer ecological importance. These wildflowers connect us to stories of conservation and to the wisdom of those who came before us, as they invite us to slow down and appreciate the magic of nature's design. When we choose to leave wildflowers untouched, we become part of a positive story. It's a story where future generations might still find trilliums each spring in Ontario, where the lady's slipper continues to peek out on misty mornings, and where Western Prairie Fringed Orchids might just reclaim a bit more of its prairie home. Our small actions, or sometimes inactions, resisting that pick, for example, ripple outwards to make a big difference. Now, I would love your thoughts. Should picking rare wildflowers come with a fine or a penalty? Or do you think education and awareness are enough? Drop a comment with your opinion. This is a conversation we should all be having. After all, protecting nature often starts with talking about it and sharing ideas. Check out the link in the description to join Project ReWild and the Forest Bathing Society for an in-person forest bathing session. Come, experience firsthand what it's like to immerse yourself in a wild setting without disturbing it. Smell the leaves, listen to the birds, and maybe spot some of the wildflowers we talked about today. We promise, no picking. It's like a guided meditation in nature that will leave you feeling refreshed and inspired to protect these beautiful species. I'll be there in person, and I highly encourage you to join me and give it a try. Thank you so much for joining me, Molle Dorst, on this little journey today. If you enjoyed this explainer and want to see more nature, mindfulness, and conservation content, don't forget to like and subscribe for future videos. Until next time, remember the wildflowers thank you for your kindness. Stay curious, stay compassionate, and happy wandering. I'll see you in the forest.